Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life, won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together. Mothers and fathers, sisters and brothers, friends forever, strengthening the ties that keep us together.
How can our fear of judgment impact our relationships? Welcome to Making It Last podcast. I'm your host, Nurin Daly, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. And we're speaking with Michelle Kuei. She's a visibility confidence coach. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
So how can our fear of judgment impact our relationships?
So the fear of judgment, imagine the fear is blocks or brick that you lay down to build something. And, we all have seen people building blocks or buildings and even kids playing Lego. It lay down the foundation of how your building is going to build. So there's options that you can build the building based on the fear, or you can build it based on the love. And that would determine the type of relationship that you see and interact with each other. So if you were to build this building that you're going to bring people in to connect with people, the fear becomes a roadblock of how you connect with another human being. So instead of having an open doorway or open driveway, you create these blocks by lay down brick by brick of the fear to judgment. Now, what are the fear to judgment? It could be internal fear about myself, or it could be external, the judgment against someone else. As someone walked by, that person is too short, that person is too tall, that person is too big, that person is too small. In order for human beings to understand how and comprehend what's going on in the world, we need to put labels. So if I were to say this is a cup, you would understand what does a cup mean. So same thing with being good or bad, being tall or short, being big or small. We put these labels on, a judgment label, right, so that we can comprehend in our human mind, what does that mean? And that becomes a limiting way of seeing the world, how we are within. And when something is against our belief, when something is out of our norm, we start going into that fight and flight mode, wanting to protect ourselves. And that's when the fear actually shows up. That is when the fear becomes an emotion, and emotion lead to a behavior. So when we are having the fear of judgment, we either retract ourselves from the relationship, or we start going into that combative mode to fight off whatever is at threat for us. And there's actually a study that talks about where the fear, scientists have been studying about the fear. So they actually found an area in the hypothalamus that actually locate how fear can show up or light up on the MRI. And when the fear comes up, that area in our hypothalamus it's actually called amygdala. That's the biological term of the area where the fear will actually show up. And when someone is in a fight and flight protective mode, that area really highlights. So how do you overcome that? And they found that in the same area, there's another part in our brain. If we put enough stimulus, they actually can trigger our hormone or our feelings or courage. We can combat our fear by having a lot of courage to show up. And maybe it's, if you were imagine you're a mice and you come across this cat who's going to attack you, you're going to throw up your fist and say, okay, cat, that's right. Let's go and fight. So fear of judgment can actually affect a lot of different relationships, and it can actually alter how we react and respond to each other depending on where we are and what we choose to believe.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
Are you looking for one-of-a-kind products customized to suit your needs? Then shop at Trending Things, the place where customization is always an option. From personalized gifts to apparel, accessories, drinkware, and home decor, you name it, we make it. Get your favorite designs on any item for party favors, weddings, graduations, or any special occasion, all at affordable prices. What are you waiting for? Visit our website at trendingthings.com to order your trendy item today. Trending Things, bringing creativity to the things you love.
Would you then see it as something negative or positive, or is it a bit of both? The whole idea of fear of judgment.
I believe it's a neutral thing
Okay.
because, again, fear is here to protect us. It's really here to keep us from harm. So when you have fear of judgment, chances are, there's something about that particular person or something about yourself that you're measuring up against, right? So in order to protect yourself from being hurt or being harmed, you have this fear of being judged because it's protecting you, and you go down to the survival mode rather than showing up and being courageous. So I believe it's a very neutral thing to have. Now, some people may say, well, fear is always scary. Fear is always negative. Fear is always bad. But if you think back, would you jump off the plane doing a bungee jump? No, not necessarily. It has nothing to do with fear. You just don't want to.
Right.
So depending on how you put fear into a context of fear is negative, how about just keep it in the neutral, just like love. Love is a feeling. Fear is a feeling, a reaction that we have as a response to a behavior.
I noticed you said earlier, and I want us to backtrack a bit to that. You said internal and external. Elaborate on that a little bit more for me. That sometimes they're internal fear, sometimes they're external.
Yeah, so the internal fear are things that we as human beings, we look for. So we look for protection, we look for security, we look for desire, we look for whether or not I have a safe shelter. And in any given time, if these external forces are not met or our needs are not being met by the external forces, it triggers an internal response or feelings of fear. I am afraid that I am going to lose the house. I'm losing the house because, maybe COVID happened and I couldn't afford to pay my rent. And that becomes something that's fearful for me that comes from the inside. Fear can also be coming from the outside when someone is punching or someone is becoming more violent. And that as a body response, it's a natural response for us to put up a fight. And that is the fear jumping out to protect ourselves from the external fear that we have, that we need to protect.
When with all of what you said, would you think that this is only applicable to a specific type of relationship, or do you think that what you said would apply to relationships in general, whether personal or professional?
I believe the same principle applies to everyone in every situation. How it shows up may be different. So for someone who have fear in the workplace, it could be fear of being laid off. It could be fear of being judged by our boss. So we continue to strive in making all the deadlines. At home, it could be a fear of not being seen or heard. If you're married, then maybe your husband is not listening to you. And that generates a fear of probably I'm going to lose him, right? So how it shows up is very different, but it shows up everywhere. The fear itself is the same. Fear is an emotion.
Okay. How then, given how maybe a lot of us have been socialized to see fear and the fear of judgment as something negative, how do you think we can then counteract that and go against what you've been taught?
So I believe empathy is the key to alleviate and help us strengthen the relationship that we have that was built upon fear. Especially nowadays, when we interact with someone else, there's a lot of fear behind it because, I don't know, you're wearing a mask. I don't know if I can see you. I don't know if I can trust you. But if we were to use and exercise, if we were to use and actually implement empathy, then we begin to understand each other. And I think ultimately the overall collective, we need to have more understanding through the empathy that we all have and call upon our empathy to cross over that diversity issue, multiracial issue, all these issues that we talk about. I see you because I see you. I see you as a human to human level, not a human, not because I'm Asian, not because you have a darker skin. There is no boundary. We are, at the bottom line, we're all human beings. So empathy is going to allow us to cross that cultural diversity, to cross that bridge between one person versus another. And just because someone is taller doesn't mean that the world needs to be all consist of tall people. It doesn't work that way. And it was never meant to be that way.
I know you've been enjoying the conversation, but we're going to take a little break and get a word from our sponsor.
So, the whole idea of a branding strategy sounded so exotic and so fancy to me. But after having several conversations with Neon, I now have a clearer understanding. I am sure of what my identity is, what it is that I want people to see Noreen Daly as. Thanks, Neon. Thanks, Splint. Visit them at wearesplint.com. As we're wrapping up, there are a lot of persons who sometimes I think, and that's part of what triggered this podcast, Michelle, don't spend enough time on doing things that will make their relationships better and ultimately happier. As we're wrapping up, the whole idea of fear of judgment, as you said, if it is that you see it as neutral. But even outside of that, what final words, just based on your own experience, and how have you moved beyond just the fear of judgment, given what you said to me off, before this was recorded, what can you leave with somebody listening who is still somewhat skeptical and saying it's probably easy for you to say, not knowing your story?
Yeah. I think going through 29 years of feeling really poorly about myself, carrying a lot of judgment against myself, and how I believe others are judging me, one greatest tool that I can pull out always from my pocket is listening. I believe that listening and active listening is really going to help us in understanding ourselves and also understanding others. So when you have critical judgment against yourself, come back to the center, come back to yourself and ask yourself, what is it that I am saying to myself? What is it that I am feeling? How can I empower myself to be better tomorrow? Maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. And by just listening to our true inner voice, you start to discover that beauty that you have inside of you. We may be very different from the outside. I'm short. I'm 4 feet 4 inches tall. I walk with crutches. There's a lot of things that I am not able to do in the society, but I listen to myself. I listen to what are the words that I choose to believe. I listen to the person I want to become. And when I listen to the right voice, to the more empowering voice, my possibility is endless. I can dream, and I know I can dream bigger.
I don't want to add anything to that because that's an excellent note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. This was Make It Last podcast. I'm your host, Noreen Daly, where it's all about helping us to have better relationships, not just with ourselves, but with other people. Until next time.
Are you struggling to become an effective communicator? Let Noreen Daly, the communications specialist, get you there. Services include communications consultancy, one-on-one coaching, public speaking and debate training, leadership and team building sessions, plus much more. Visit NoreenDaly.com for more info. Noreen Daly, redefining the way you communicate.
Mothers and fathers, husbands and wives, sisters and brothers, friends for life won't live in the past. All I wanna do now is making it last.